Hello and welcome to the cosmic Earth. Close your eyes and let your imagination drift across time. Let it slip beyond centuries, beyond ages, beyond the deepest layers of history, until there is nothing familiar left. You're travelling not thousands of years, not millions, but billions. 4 billion years, to a time when the Earth itself was young, a newborn world circling a fainter sun. What greets you is not the gentle planet you know today, but something raw, unfinished, and wild. The land before you is restless and alive with fire. Volcanoes erupt in every direction, painting the horizon with plumes of ash and rivers of molten rock. The crust beneath your feet groans and shifts, still thin, still fragile, breaking open to reveal the glowing heart of the planet below. The ground is never still, as if the earth itself is struggling to settle into its own skin. It is a world caught between chaos and creation. Look upward, and the sky is strange. Nothing like the soft blue of home. The atmosphere is heavy with gases: methane, carbon dioxide, ammonia and steam. Clouds churn in restless layers, tinted with hues of orange and violet, hiding the young sun behind a veil of haze. The light that pierces through feels dim and alien, casting the land in a muted glow. Lightning forks across the heavens, flashing against dark skies, striking the ground with raw energy again and again. The air would be toxic to you, the heat oppressive, the storms endless. And yet, there is a beauty in this chaos, a kind of cosmic theatre, where every eruption and every flash of lightning is part of the planet's great act of becoming. Now, imagine rain. At first, it is steam hissing against the molten rock, vanishing as quickly as it falls. But with time, as the surface cools, the rain begins to linger, pooling in shallow basins, gathering in cracks across the surface. It rains for centuries, for millennia, for ages upon ages. The downpour never stops, fed by the thick, water-laden clouds that circle the globe. Slowly, patiently, oceans are born. They spread across the raw crust, filling valleys and lowlands, cooling the fiery surface with every drop. Picture vast seas stretching beneath alien skies, dark and restless, their surfaces broken by volcanic islands and steaming vents. These oceans are different from ours, rich not in life but in chemistry, swirling with minerals and strange compounds, a vast cauldron stirred by the planet itself. Standing here, you're watching the stage being set. Earth is not yet alive, but it is preparing. In these waters, something extraordinary is about to happen. Yet for now, there is only silence. A silence broken only by storms and by fire. A silence that stretches across the globe. There are no birds to sing, no forest to whisper in the wind, no animals to stir upon the land. The earth is quiet, but it is a pregnant silence, heavy with the possibility of what might come. Imagine how it feels to walk this young world. The ground trembles with every eruption. The air smells of sulphur and ash. The horizon flickers with firelight at night, and during the day, the sun appears weakly through clouds thick with steam. Your feet crunch against newly cooled rock, sharp and glassy, black from its volcanic birth. Around you, rivers of lava glow and crackle as they harden, meeting the rain in clouds of steam. This is not a place made for comfort, not a place made for survival as you understand it. And yet, it is here, on this hostile stage, that life will take its first breath. Pause and listen. The world is louder than silence. Waves crash against young shores. Thunder rolls across the skies. Geysers of boiling water erupt from the deep, venting the heat of the planet into the air. And beneath it all, something quieter, slower, but no less powerful. Chemical whispers, molecules colliding, forming, breaking apart, and forming again in an endless cycle. The oceans are alive with potential. Within their depths, atoms are dancing toward complexity, guided by chance, by energy, and by the restless creativity of nature. If you could hold a droplet of this ancient water in your hand, you might not see much. It would look dark, perhaps cloudy, heavy with minerals and strange compounds, and yet within it lies a hidden drama, invisible to the eye. Simple molecules are colliding, reacting, testing combinations. The energy of lightning splits them apart, only for them to bond again in new forms. Heat from volcanic vents churns them like a cosmic mixer, and minerals at the ocean floor provide surfaces for delicate patterns to emerge. Slowly, patiently, the building blocks of life are assembling themselves, not with intention, not with purpose, but with possibility. And you stand as a witness. You're the only one to see it, the moment before the first life arises. The earth does not yet know what it will become. It does not yet know forests, rivers, or creatures, but already the seeds of all of it lie waiting. The green of leaves, the song of whales, the beating of wings, all of it is foreshadowed in this silent chemistry, waiting to unfold. This young earth is a paradox. To you it feels hostile, almost uninhabitable, and yet it is exactly this environment that makes a life possible. Without the lightning, there would be no sparks to drive reactions. Without the heat of volcanoes, no energy to stir the seas. Without the storms, no mixing of the elements. Every violent eruption, every thunderclap, every boiling vent is a step in the choreography of creation. Chaos is not the enemy here. It is the midwife of life. You might picture yourself walking to the edge of a volcanic shore. Steam rises in heavy curtains. The water hisses as it meets the hot rock, and beneath the surface vents release boiling streams into the ocean. These are not gentle places, but they are laboratories, testing grounds where molecules combine in endless variations. Somewhere, in one droplet, in one corner of this immense ocean, the right combination is forming, the combination that will change everything. It is strange to think that all of life, all the diversity of creatures that have ever existed, all the stories of humanity and every dream you've ever dreamed, began here. In a moment invisible to the eye, in a world that would seem unlivable to you, the first spark of life waits just beyond the horizon. But for now, you are still standing at the dawn before life. This is the threshold, a planet of rock and fire, softened by oceans but not yet softened by life. A world filled with storms and silence, not yet filled with voices. This is Earth's great pause, the breath before the first breath. Imagine the patience of the universe. 4 billion years ago, this was all there was. Storms, oceans, fire, and stone. And yet within this simplicity, everything was already written. The earth was waiting for its first awakening. As you linger in this place, feel the immensity of time. Let it stretch around you like an endless horizon. The stars above you are ancient, yet even they were younger then, burning just as they do now, though the sun's light was dimmer, its warmth less strong. The galaxy itself seemed quieter, though comets and asteroids still wandered, sometimes striking the Earth, shaping its destiny with every impact. You're standing in a moment that is fragile and immense all at once, a moment no creature could have witnessed, and yet a moment that contains the seed of everything. This is the beginning, though not yet begun. The silence before music, the canvas before paint, the stage before the play. Earth, 4 billion years ago, waiting to take its first breath, and you are here, watching. The Earth, 4 billion years ago, was a place of extremes. It was a planet without forests, without rivers, without the softness of grass or the breath of animals. It was silent, though not in the way you know silence now. There was no bird song to break it, no rustle of leaves, no chorus of insects. It was a silence that felt vast, immense and heavy, interrupted only by the voice of the earth itself, for the earth, even in silence, was never still. Everywhere you turned, the land moved and shifted. Volcanoes dominated the horizon. towering giants that bled fire into the sky, molten rivers cut across the surface, glowing with a fierce orange light that reflected against thick clouds above. The ground was a raw mosaic of black stone, freshly born, jagged and sharp, cooled too quickly to become smooth. From cracks in this newborn crust, steam hissed upward, curling into the air, joining the heavy atmosphere that wrapped the world like a shroud. The air itself was thick, heavy with gases that your lungs could not take. Methane, carbon dioxide, sulfur compounds, ammonia, an alien mixture that choked the sky, filling it with haze. The sunlight that reached the ground was dim, filtered through layers of particle and vapour, casting everything in muted tones. Shadows stretched long and strange, and the colours of the sky shifted between deep orange and purple, never the comforting blue we know today. To walk this world was to step beneath a ceiling of fire and smoke, a reminder that the planet itself was still in its earlier stages of becoming. If you stood still on this rocky land, you would hear the heartbeat of the earth, the deep rumble of magma shifting below, the cracking of the surface as new mountains rose and others crumbled, the hiss of vents exhaling steam into the atmosphere, thunder rolling across the skies as lightning split the clouds again and again, illuminating the landscape in quick, brilliant flashes. Each strike carried with it an immense force, raw energy delivered to the young earth, scattering through the air and across the ground. The silence of this planet was not empty. It was filled with the slow, heavy sound of creation. And yet, for all its violence, this world was breathtaking. Imagine standing at the edge of a glowing lava plain as the horizon melts into shimmering waves of heat. Imagine watching a volcano erupt in the distance, a plume of fire and ash soaring into the sky, glowing red against the violet haze. Imagine rain falling through that same sky, drops sizzling into steam as they touch the hot ground, creating a veil of mist that curled upward in ghostly forms. It was a planet caught in a kind of beauty only creation can hold, wild, unfinished, and filled with promise. The seas were beginning to claim their place, though they were nothing like the oceans we know. They were dark, heavy waters, thick with minerals, stirred constantly by the heat of the land and the restless energy of the skies. Waves crashed against newborn shores, carving the stone even as it cooled. These oceans were vast cauldrons, rich with the elements of chemistry, waiting for the long and patient work that would someday give rise to life. But for now they were empty of creatures, silent beneath alien skies, their surfaces broken only by islands of jagged stone and rivers of steam. Picture yourself walking along such a shore. The air is dense, hot, and filled with the acrid taste of sulphur. The ground beneath your feet is unstable, rumbling faintly as though it might break open at any moment. Waves crash with a hollow sound against the rock, and every now and then the sea bursts upward in a spray of boiling water when it meets a vent from below. The smell of minerals clings to everything. The bitter tang of iron, the sharpness of sulphur, the heavy scent of stone cooling from fire. It is not a place made for comfort, not a place that invites you to linger, and yet it is the place where everything begins. Lightning strikes the surface of the sea, crackling across the waves. Each bolt splits molecules, driving reactions, igniting sparks of chemistry. Energy flows into the oceans again and again, relentless, tireless, as though the earth itself is conducting an experiment on an unimaginable scale. The land, too, is part of this great experiment, with its volcanic heat, its gases and its storms. Every corner of the planet is a laboratory, mixing and breaking and reforming the pieces of matter. Out of this constant turmoil, something is quietly preparing to emerge, But for now, it is only silence. A silence unlike any other in history. The kind of silence that feels immense and almost overwhelming. If you listen closely, you realize it is not truly empty. It is filled with the sounds of the planet itself, the roar of fire, the hiss of steam, the crash of waves, the roll of thunder. But it is silent in a deeper sense. Silent because there is no voice of life, no bird, no insect, no whale, no human. The earth has not yet learned to sing. This silence carries with it a strange weight. It stretches across mountains and valleys, across oceans and volcanic plains, unbroken for millions of years. Imagine walking across such a world, your footsteps the only rhythm, your breath the only voice. Imagine how vast the land would feel with nothing moving upon it except the shifting of stone. It would feel lonely, yes, but also powerful, as though you were standing in a cathedral not yet filled with worshippers, a space immense and waiting, holding its breath for something still to come. You might wonder what it felt like for a planet to exist in such a state, to be alive with fire and storms, but not alive with creatures, to hold within it the potential for forests, for rivers teeming with fish, for skies filled with wings, but not yet to see them. In some ways, this world was asleep, though restless in its dreaming. It was waiting to awaken, waiting for the first spark, the first flicker of something that could multiply and grow, the first breath that would break the silence. Even the stars above looked different. The young sun was weaker than it is today, its light reaching the earth with less warmth. Yet it was no less vital. Its rays fed the chemistry of the oceans, mingling with lightning and volcanic heat to stir the waters again and again. Beyond the sun, the stars wheeled overhead, distant and cold, looking down upon a planet still in its infancy. Comets and asteroids occasionally streaked across the sky, sometimes falling to Earth in fiery impacts, bringing with them new minerals, perhaps even new ingredients for the chemistry that was underway. Each impact was destructive, yet each also added to the story of creation, delivering what the Earth might need to take its next step. In the silence of this world, time itself feels heavy. Millennia pass like moments. The planet shifts and reshapes itself endlessly. Fire giving way to stone, stone breaking open again to reveal more fire. The oceans deepen, the atmosphere changes, storms roll endlessly across the skies. You stand as a witness to this endless cycle, knowing that within it lies the seed of something unimaginable. There is beauty in this silence, a beauty that comes from beginnings. To look upon this planet is to look upon potential, raw and unshaped. It is to see the clay before the sculptor, the canvas before the artist, the strings before the first note of music. The silence is not absence, it is promise. And so, as you stand upon this young earth, listening to the roar of volcanoes, watching lightning split the skies and hearing the hiss of oceans meeting fire, you realize that silence is not the end of the story. It is the beginning. Out of this vast, silent planet of rock and fire, life will rise. Slowly, delicately, invisibly at first, but with time it will fill the world with voices. The silence will not last forever. For now, though, let yourself linger in it. Let yourself feel the immensity of a world before life. Breathe in the strangeness of skies filled with gases, seas dark with minerals, land glowing with fire. Imagine walking upon a planet that has not yet learned to breathe, not yet learned to sing, but holds within it the promise of all the songs that will ever be sung. This is Earth 4 billion years ago, silent, fiery, waiting. The silence of the early Earth stretched endlessly, broken only by fire and storm until something remarkable began to happen. The first waters, once trapped in vapour and steam, began their slow descent from the sky. For countless ages rain fell upon the raw crust of the earth, drop after drop, storm after storm, until it became more than just weather. It became the shaping hand of oceans. Imagine the sound of those rains. Not the gentle patter you know, but a relentless hiss as each drop struck hot stone and turned instantly into steam. For thousands of years the rain never stopped. Clouds rolled endlessly above, their bellies heavy with vapour, lightning flashing through them, thunder shaking the skies. Down below, the surface of the earth sizzled, cooled, and cracked beneath this constant downpour. The cycle was endless. Evaporation, condensation, rain. It was a cleansing that slowly softened the fiery skin of the world, preparing it for something entirely new. At first, the water gathered in shallow pools, steaming and bubbling in the heat. These pools joined together, carving small lakes and craters and valleys, dark and rich with minerals. Over time, as rains continued, they grew deeper. Rivers formed, winding through jagged rocks, carving channels across the land. And slowly, across countless ages, these waters merged into basins, filling them, stretching wider and wider, until the first oceans began to take shape. They were not the oceans you know today. They were alien seas, thick with dissolved minerals, tinted green and brown, stirred constantly by volcanic heat. Their waves rolled heavy and sluggish under skies that were not yet blue but veiled in orange haze. The air was dense, heavy with carbon dioxide and methane, so that the horizons were never clear, the line between sea and sky always blurred. And yet, in their strangeness, these oceans carried the ingredients of something extraordinary. They were not empty. They were chemical laboratories, vast and restless, filled with the building blocks of life waiting to be stirred together. Picture yourself standing at the edge of such a sea. The waves do not sparkle with light as you expect, for the sun is dim, its rays filtered through clouds. Instead, the surface glimmers faintly, oily with minerals reflecting copper tones from the sky. The water is warm to the touch, heated by the restless earth below, carrying the scent of sulphur and iron. Steam rises and curls wherever vents crack open beneath the surface, sending bursts of gas and heat upward like breath from some hidden furnace. The horizon is wide, endless, yet unfamiliar, a reminder that this is not yet a world made for living creatures, but one preparing to host them. The oceans deepened slowly, patiently. Each drop of rain carried with it a story from the sky, a trace of carbon, a touch of nitrogen, a handful of hydrogen and oxygen. These elements swirled together in the water, mixing endlessly with minerals washed down from volcanic stone. Energy poured into the seas in every form imaginable. The heat of magma, the strike of lightning, the glow of ultraviolet light from the sun above. Every molecule was part of a vast ongoing experiment, a quiet chemistry that was waiting to cross an invisible threshold. But from your vantage point, standing here in imagination, you would only see the surface. You would see a restless sea rolling under strange skies, endless waves breaking upon volcanic shores. You might see storms sweeping across the water, sheets of rain blurring the horizon, thunder rolling across the young earth. You might see meteors streak through the atmosphere and crash into the sea, sending great plumes of spray and steam skyward, their minerals dissolving into the water, joining the mixture. The oceans were not still, not yet peaceful, but alive with forces that churned and stirred them without rest. If you leaned closer, if you placed your hand into the water, you might feel the warmth of hidden vents, places where the crust of the earth cracked open to reveal the heat below. From these vents, rich black plumes of minerals spilled outward, curling like smoke beneath the sea. Around them, hot springs bubbled, carrying with them an astonishing wealth of chemistry. Here, in the dark and warmth, was a perfect cradle for beginnings. Here, in these hidden corners of the oceans, the elements had both protection and energy, both raw materials and endless possibility. The skies above, though alien, contributed their part as well. Each flash of lightning broke molecules apart, scattering them into fragments that rejoined in new ways. Ultraviolet rays from the young sun poured through the haze, reaching the water's surface and sparking reactions among the dissolved gases. Storm after storm delivered energy into the oceans, over and over again, as though the planet itself was insistent on preparing the stage for something miraculous. And always, the rain continued. Imagine the feeling of standing beneath such endless rain, knowing it has fallen for centuries, millennia, longer than human imagination can grasp. The air would be thick with moisture, your skin constantly damp, the horizon always blurred by mist. This was the world before calm skies, before gentle blue days. It was a place of constant transformation, every drop a sculptor's hand, carving valleys, filling basins, creating oceans that would one day cradle life. There was a kind of poetry in this transformation. Fire gave way to water, though never fully. The planet was still restless, still alive with volcanoes, still splitting open to release its inner heat. But water claimed its place, slowly balancing fire, tempering its violence, softening the rawness of the land. What had been a world of rock and flame was now becoming a world of seas and skies. Something essential was shifting, something that would allow the story of life to begin. Imagine how vast these early oceans must have felt. With no continents as we know them, the seas stretched almost endlessly, broken only by volcanic islands and rocky ridges. To stand upon one of these islands would be to see nothing but water in every direction, a horizon without end, a sea without creatures. The silence of such a view would be immense, no gulls wheeling above, no fish darting below, no voices of whales rising from the depths, just waves rolling, winds sighing, thunder echoing across the skies. And yet, hidden within these alien waters, something small and fragile was already beginning. Molecules were forming chains, experimenting with shapes, breaking apart and forming again. Droplets of chemistry gathered, sometimes protected by bubbles, sometimes trapped in clay at the ocean floor. It was too small to see, too delicate to grasp, and yet it was happening everywhere, invisibly. The oceans were not empty after all. They were alive with potential, pregnant with the first whispers of life. As you stand in imagination upon the edge of this primeval shore, you might feel the weight of what is to come. For these oceans, strange and alien as they seem, are the ancestors of every ocean today. The water that fell then still cycles through our world now, in clouds, in rivers, in seas, in the rain that touches your face. The same water that once hissed against volcanic stone now flows in veins of rivers, now fills the blue depths of the Pacific, now nourishes every living thing. In a way, to stand at this shore is to stand at the beginning of everything, to see the first canvas stretched, the first stage set, the first ingredients gathered for a story that would unfold across billions of years. The oceans formed beneath alien skies, but they did not stay alien forever. Slowly, patiently, they became familiar, became home. They became the cradle of every fish, every coral reef, every dolphin's leap, every human voyage across waves. But in these earliest days they were quiet, heavy, strange, and waiting. And perhaps As the rain continued to fall and the lightning danced across the horizon, the planet itself seemed to wait with them. Wait for the first spark, wait for the silence to be broken, wait for the oceans to whisper their first secret of life. The oceans had formed, wide and restless, stretching beneath skies veiled in haze. They rolled endlessly, carrying with them minerals from the land, gases from the air, and the warmth of hidden fires beneath the seafloor. To gaze upon them now would be to see emptiness, but it was an emptiness full of potential. For within these waters something subtle and mysterious was beginning to stir. The earth itself had become a laboratory, and chemistry was its language. It began with simple molecules drifting and colliding in the endless churn of the seas. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, the alphabet of life, swirled together in countless combinations. They joined into chains, broke apart and reassembled again. Each wave, each lightning strike, each burst of heat from the ocean floor added energy to this restless mixing. The seas were not calm but alive with invisible reactions, a ceaseless dance of atoms testing new forms, shaping possibilities that had never existed before. Imagine leaning close to the water, peering into its depths. You would not see creatures swimming, nor plants drifting, nor even the faintest sign of movement. And yet, hidden in droplets too small for the eye, there was motion. Molecules were gathering together into tiny clusters, wrapping themselves in delicate layers, sometimes surviving for a heartbeat longer than before, sometimes dissolving instantly. It was trial and error on a planetary scale, an endless experiment without direction, driven only by chance and energy. But in that chance lay the seeds of everything. The chemistry of these early oceans was strange, unlike anything we know today. There were no oxygen-rich waters, no clear blue shallows. Instead, the seas were thick with dissolved metals, their colours shifting in hues of green and brown, stirred by constant volcanic activity. Iron, sulphur, and phosphorus mingled with carbon compounds, forming an unseen soup that stretched across the world. It was not yet life, but it was not entirely lifeless either. It was a liminal state, balanced on the edge of transformation. Consider the power of a single lightning strike. When it tore across the sky and struck the surface of the sea, it released a surge of energy into the molecules below. Bonds shattered, fragments scattered, and new patterns emerged in the chaos. Each storm rewrote the chemistry of the water, each flash of light carving pathways that could not have formed otherwise. The early Earth was full of such moments, countless sparks in countless places, repeated for millions of years. And with each spark the chances of something new grew stronger. Deep below, at the cracks in the ocean floor, another kind of energy was at work. Black plumes of minerals rose from hydrothermal vents, rich with iron and sulphur, spreading warmth and nutrients into the water. Around these vents, the chemistry was intense and fertile, as if the earth itself were exhaling the ingredients of beginnings. Heat and minerals combined to form delicate structures, tiny compartments within rock and clay where molecules could gather more closely, sheltered from the vastness of the ocean outside. Within such sheltered spaces, complexity could take root, protected and nurtured by stone. The strangeness of this chemistry lay in its persistence. Over and over again, molecules formed and reformed, some fleeting, some lasting a little longer. They were not yet alive, but they were learning the language of life. Chains of carbon linked with hydrogen, spirals of atoms coiled and uncoiled, droplets of fatty molecules gathered into bubbles that held other molecules inside. It was improvisation without end, a symphony of possibilities played on the smallest scale imaginable. If you could shrink yourself down and drift within one of these microscopic worlds, it would appear as a landscape of constant motion. Molecules rushing past, bumping into one another, some colliding gently, others with force enough to fuse, chains twisting into spirals, bubbles forming, breaking, forming again. A vast crowd of invisible players, each with a role to test, none yet holding the full script of life. And yet, within this chaos, something remarkable was beginning. Patterns. Patterns meant repetition. Some chains of molecules were more stable than others, holding their form for longer. Some bubbles of chemistry were better at protecting their contents, surviving longer in the churning water. Each moment of survival, no matter how brief, was a step toward endurance, and each step toward endurance was a step toward life. Though still far from being alive, these molecular structures were practicing, rehearsing the roles that would one day become the foundation of every living cell. Imagine watching this process unfold over thousands of years. You would see no sudden miracles, no instant leap from lifelessness to life. Instead, you would see persistence, molecules repeating themselves, structures forming again and again, as if the world itself were insisting on trying until something worked. It was not intelligence guiding them, but the laws of chemistry, the push and pull of energy and stability, trial and chance written into the language of atoms. And in time, those patterns became more intricate, more capable of lasting, more able to shape themselves into the first whispers of living order. The strange chemistry of creation was not limited to the sea alone. On the land, where volcanic rock met shallow pools, other experiments unfolded. Pools warmed by sunlight and heated by geothermal vents concentrated molecules as water evaporated, leaving behind dense mixtures of carbon compounds. Here too molecules joined, broke, and reformed, shaped by cycles of wetness and dryness, energy and rest. Each drying pool was like a crucible, forging chains that could not have formed in the wide ocean. Each new rain filled the pool again, washing the chains into new combinations, repeating the process endlessly. From the sky came more ingredients, delivered by comets and asteroids that struck the Earth with fiery impact. These visitors carried organic compounds formed in the depths of space, molecules forged in interstellar clouds long before Earth itself existed. When they fell into the seas, they added their fragments to the mix, enriching the experiment with cosmic contributions. It was as though the universe itself had sent gifts to Earth, tiny packages of possibility wrapped in stone and ice, to be opened upon impact and dissolved into the oceans. It is strange to think that everything we know of life began in such small, invisible steps. The chemistry of creation was slow, patient and quiet, yet relentless. For millions of years the oceans and the land performed this experiment without pause, until chance and repetition shaped a pathway that could last. Out of countless possibilities, a few molecules began to copy themselves, holding their structure long enough to pass it on. It was not yet life, but it was the threshold of life, the point where chemistry began to echo biology. And so the strange chemistry of creation carried on, day by day, storm by storm, wave by wave, molecule by molecule. No moment would have seemed special to witness, no single instant marking the beginning. But taken together, across millions of years, the story was clear. The Earth was no longer only a planet of rock and water and fire. It was becoming something else, a place where the boundary between matter and life was dissolving, a place where the silence was about to be broken. To imagine it is to imagine patience beyond measure. The Earth did not hurry, did not rush, but moved forward with a quiet certainty of time. From simple molecules came chains, from chains came patterns, from patterns came the possibility of memory. and from memory came the first fragile step toward life. This was the chemistry of creation, the quiet alchemy that turned a silent planet into a living one. And all of it, every chain, every bubble, every spark, was leading toward a moment that would change the world forever. The first spark that made the leap, the first flicker of life in the vast oceans of possibility. The oceans stretched endlessly, vast and ancient, their surface rippling beneath a sky still heavy with haze. To most eyes they would have seemed empty, silent waters without form or meaning. Yet within them, hidden in the smallest spaces, something extraordinary was stirring. These were no longer merely oceans of stone and salt, but oceans of whispers, molecules speaking to one another in the quiet language of chemistry, testing shapes, testing endurance, testing the possibility of becoming alive. The whispers of primordial waters could not be heard in sound, for they spoke in patterns, in repetitions, in the faint persistence of order that emerged from chaos. Droplets of molecules gathered into tiny spheres, fragile yet lasting longer each time. Strands of carbon curled and twisted, as though practicing the dance of memory. In the hidden pools of the sea, in the vents that glowed like embers beneath the waves, in the shallow shores that dried and filled again with every cycle of rain, the whispers repeated themselves. It was as if the entire planet had become a chorus, each place singing in its own invisible way. If you could shrink yourself to the scale of these beginnings, you would drift among droplets that seemed like worlds unto themselves. Inside each droplet, molecules drifted together, colliding, sometimes breaking, sometimes clinging. Some bonds dissolved instantly, others held for a little longer, as if reluctant to let go. In time, a few of these droplets sheltered patterns that repeated, structures that echoed themselves. They were not alive, not yet, but they were the rehearsals of life, carried gently within liquid shells. Imagine watching such a droplet floating in the water, fragile, transparent, hardly more than a bubble of molecules. From the outside it looked unremarkable, no different from countless others. But within, something quiet was happening. Molecules formed shapes that could copy themselves, even if only imperfectly, even if only for a short while. Each time the droplet survived a little longer, each time the shapes inside lasted through a few more collisions, the chances of something greater increased. It was not life, but it was the whisper of life, carried softly by the waters. The oceans at this time were restless. Currents swept molecules across great distances. Storms churned the surface, and heat rose from the deep vents below. Each motion mixed and scattered the whispers, spreading them into new combinations. And each combination was a new trial, a new experiment. The planet did not stop, did not rest. Millions upon millions of times, the same attempts were made, the same failures repeated, the same fragile successes tested again. The whispers endured because they were countless, because they never ceased. Sometimes the whispers would fade. A droplet would dissolve, its molecules scattered into the vast ocean. A fragile strand of chemistry would break apart, never to be formed again. But elsewhere, in another droplet, in another pool, in another corner of the world, the same pattern would reappear. And in that persistence lay a secret. The whispers were not chance alone, but inevitability. Given enough time, enough energy, enough repetition, the chemistry of Earth could not help but edge toward life. The whispers carried not only in the seas but in the rains that fell from the skies. Each storm washed minerals from the rocks. Each droplet of rain delivered new chemicals to the pools waiting on the land. Pools warmed by sunlight or by the hidden breath of volcanic heat concentrated these chemicals further, giving them a stage on which to test themselves. As the waters evaporated, the whispers grew denser. Molecules pressed close together, reacting in ways they could not in the vast openness of the ocean. When the rains came again, they washed the patterns onward, scattering them back into the seas. It was a cycle of gathering and dispersal, of trial and renewal, repeated endlessly. Far beyond Earth, in the dark spaces between stars, similar molecules had already formed long before. Comets and meteorites, drifting relics of creation, carried them across the void. When they struck the young Earth, they delivered their hidden cargo, adding new whispers to the song of the oceans. These molecules were gifts of the cosmos itself, born in the hearts of distant stars, scattered through space, and finally brought to rest in the waters of this world. With their arrival, Earth's whispers grew richer, more varied, more capable of weaving complexity. Picture the world then: a sky dim and orange, a sea restless and dark, waves foaming against shores of black volcanic rock. To human eyes it might seem desolate, even hostile, but in truth it was alive with hidden voices. Every pool, every droplet, every vent, every tide was alive with whispers too small to see, yet profound in their meaning. They were the beginnings of everything, the first fragile draft of the script of life. And though they were fragile, though they failed endlessly, they did not disappear. The waters carried them forward, repeating the same trials for thousands upon thousands of years. With each cycle, the whispers grew clearer, more coherent. Patterns began to sustain themselves, droplets began to endure longer, and molecules began to copy their shapes with greater fidelity. The whispers of chemistry were learning the language of biology. It is easy to think of life's origin as a sudden spark, a single miraculous event. But the whispers tell another story, a story of patience, of countless small beginnings layered upon one another. Life did not arrive in an instant, but unfolded through endless attempts, through quiet rehearsals whispered by the waters. It was not one miracle, but millions, each small, each fleeting, each adding to the next. Even now the oceans remember. In every cell of every living creature, water is the stage on which life performs. Molecules drift, collide, and bond within us just as they once did in the primordial seas. Each heartbeat carries whispers older than time, echoes of the first waters that sheltered the beginnings of life. We are made not only of those molecules, but of the patience of their endless rehearsals, of the whispers that persisted until they became voices. If you close your eyes, you might imagine floating upon those ancient seas. The air is heavy, the horizon is dim, the waves are endless. Yet beneath you, in the invisible depths, whispers rise and fall like a hidden tide. They are soft, steady, insistent, a music only the planet could hear. It is the sound of becoming, the sound of chemistry leaning toward life. The whispers were not words, but they carried meaning. They spoke of endurance, of repetition, of the slow weaving of complexity. They spoke of the possibility hidden within simplicity, of the strength that arises from patience. They spoke of a future unseen, of forests and rivers and creatures and consciousness, though none of that yet existed. They spoke only of survival, of persistence, of the quiet determination that is the root of all life. The waters continued their work, their whispers growing stronger with each passing millennium, and though no witness stood upon the shores to listen, the earth itself carried the memory. For one day those whispers would become voices, and those voices would fill the planet with song. But for now, in this time before life, the world was content to whisper, softly, endlessly, patiently, and you, imagining yourself there, are listening to those whispers across 4 billion years. You're hearing the faint echoes of your own beginnings, carried through the oceans of time. You're part of those whispers, just as they are part of you. And in their persistence, you find the first breath of life waiting just beyond the horizon. The oceans had whispered for so long that it seemed they would never rise above silence. For millions upon millions of years, molecules gathered, broke apart and gathered again. Droplets formed only to dissolve, fragile patterns repeated only to fade. It was a symphony of beginnings without an ending, a rehearsal with no final performance. But then, somewhere in the restless waters of early Earth, the whispers deepened into something more. A new sound emerged, quiet yet enduring. A spark flickered, not of fire, but of order, and that spark would change everything. No one knows exactly where it happened. Perhaps it was in the warmth of a tidal pool, shallow and rich with minerals, where sunlight and evaporation work together to concentrate the chemistry of life. Perhaps it was near a deep-sea vent where heat and pressure created pockets of strange stability. Or perhaps it was scattered across many places at once, the same quiet transformation occurring again and again until one endured long enough to become more than chance. Wherever it was, the ocean held its breath. For the first time, patterns did not simply fade. They endured, they copied, they carried their own memory forward. The spark was not a flame, not light or heat, but a moment when molecules discovered a new kind of persistence. Instead of simply drifting and dissolving, some began to hold the ability to replicate, to create echoes of themselves. They were imperfect echoes, blurred and fragile, but they were enough. For the first time, chemistry had crossed a threshold. What had once been whispers now became voices, faint and hesitant, but voices all the same. If you could watch it happen, you might see it as nothing more than strands twisting and untwisting, droplets dividing and reforming. It would look unremarkable, like nothing more than movement in water. Yet within those movements lay something profound. For the first time, patterns carried information. For the first time, a droplet of molecules contained not just matter, but memory. It could not think, it could not feel, but it could repeat itself, and in that repetition was the seed of survival. The spark did not arrive as perfection. The first self-copying molecules were fragile. They often broke apart, their patterns lost to the chaos of the seas. But sometimes one survived long enough to make another, and another still. And sometimes a small change crept into the pattern, not enough to destroy it, but enough to make it slightly different. Most changes led nowhere, but a few gave the pattern a little more stability, a little more resilience. In this way, the first spark carried not only life's birth, but life's future. Variation, persistence, the slow dance of evolution. From that moment, Earth was no longer silent. Its oceans were no longer only water and stone. They now contain the beginnings of history, the first story ever written on this world. Each molecule that copied itself became a sentence in that story, each variation a new line, each survival a new chapter. It was still fragile, still uncertain, but it was no longer fleeting. For the first time, something of the past remained in the present. You might imagine floating above the seas of that young Earth, watching the waves ripple in the dim orange light. Nothing on the surface would betray what was happening below. There were no creatures yet, no plants, no motion larger than a current or a storm. Yet beneath the surface, in droplets smaller than dust, the spark was rewriting the destiny of the planet. It was invisible, silent, and yet it carried the future of forests and oceans, of birds and mountains, of us. The spark spread slowly, carried by currents, by tides, by rains that washed droplets from one place to another. Each time a pattern survived, it seeded the possibility of more. Each time it failed, the ocean tried again. The world itself became a cradle, holding the fragile beginnings of what would become life. Imagine the patience of that time. Millions of years passed in which these tiny sparks grew, multiplied, and vanished again. To the Earth, time was endless, and the slow rise of complexity was simply part of its rhythm. But within those oceans, something irreversible had begun. The whispers of chemistry had given way to the first words of biology. The spark did not know its own significance. It did not know it would one day become the beating of wings, the blooming of flowers, the pulse of thought in a human mind. It simply persisted, repeating itself again and again, unknowing, unthinking, but unstoppable. And yet, in its persistence, the Earth had crossed a threshold. From that point onward, life was not just possible, it was inevitable. And perhaps, if you close your eyes, you might hear that first spark. Not as sound, not as light, but as a quiet pulse carried through the waters. It is the same pulse that beats within every living thing, the same rhythm that connects you to that distant time. Every cell in your body carries echoes of that spark. Every breath you take is part of its legacy. You're living proof that the spark was real, that it endured, that it changed everything. The oceans of 4 billion years ago no longer exist. Their shores have shifted, their waters have mixed, their chemistry transformed. But the spark that first stirred within them has never vanished. It grew, it spread, it became all of life. Even now it continues in every seed that germinates, in every heartbeat, in every child born. The first spark still burns quietly, not in fire but in persistence, not in light but in memory. So as you drift in thought, imagine yourself standing at the edge of those ancient waters, watching the waves rise and fall. The world is silent, the air heavy, the sky dim. Yet beneath the surface something is happening that will never be undone. The spark is there, hidden but alive, carrying the promise of everything to come. And though you cannot see it, though you cannot touch it, you know it is real. You know it is the beginning of life itself. And in that moment, you are connected not only to the past, but to the entirety of existence. You're listening to the first spark, the first word in the story of the life, the moment that changed everything. When the spark of life first took hold, it didn't rise as something vast or obvious. There were no forests, no creatures, no movements upon the land or sea. The new world of life was hidden in places so small they could barely be imagined. Droplets of water, thin films upon rock, tiny bubbles within the tide, all of these became worlds unto themselves. Within them, molecules gathered, organized, and began to form the first true cells. Life's earliest chapters were not written in grandeur, but in quiet, microscopic realms. Imagine yourself shrinking down, smaller than dust, until the surface of a droplet stretches around you like a globe. Within it, the molecules swirl, colliding and separating, flowing and reforming. Most of them drift without order, obeying nothing but chance. But here and there something remarkable occurs. A strand bends and folds upon itself. A bubble forms, enclosing its contents. A pattern copies, leaving behind another echo of its own shape. These are the beginnings of the first cells, the tiny vessels that would hold and protect life's fragile instructions. The droplet is more than water. It is a laboratory, a stage where chemistry and time rehearse endlessly. The walls of the droplet, thin as they are, create a boundary, keeping some molecules in and others out. In this simple separation lies a revolution, for within that thin wall, the molecules can work together. They can build, they can preserve, they can endure. Outside, the ocean is chaos, but within the droplet, order can grow. It is in these microscopic rooms that the first living systems began to take shape. You might see strands of molecules winding into spirals, forming primitive chains of memory. You might see fatty layers folding upon themselves, creating bubbles that protect their fragile cargo. It is not yet the complexity of life as you know it, but it is something more than the silence that came before. These droplets, these tiny cells, are the first shelters of survival. Within them, patterns of molecules start to perform a kind of dialogue. One reaction feeds another, which in turn fuels another still. Loops of chemistry begin to form, cycling endlessly, creating networks of cause and effect. In this way, the first metabolism is born, not yet the breath of oxygen, not yet the energy of sunlight captured by plants, but something humbler and simpler. It is a closed circle of reactions, a way for the droplet to sustain itself, to hold on a little longer against the dissolving currents of the sea. The ocean is vast and indifferent, yet within it countless of these tiny worlds arise. Most are fragile, breaking apart before they can sustain their fragile systems, but some persist, some find stability. Those droplets that last become the seedbeds of life's future. They are not visible to the naked eye, not even to the keenest observer. But within them, the foundation of every living thing has already been laid. Picture the silence of that time. The earth still wears its veil of storms, its surface restless with fire and water. Yet within the oceans, invisible dramas unfold, droplets drift, collide, and burst. Some dissolve into nothing, while others endure, carrying forward their fragile codes. In these countless repetitions, chance and necessity weave together into something enduring. What was once only chemistry becomes something more. It becomes biology. The first true cells are unlike anything alive today. They are crude, unstable, endlessly vulnerable. They cannot think, cannot feel, cannot move with intent, and yet within them lies the potential of everything to come. Each one is a capsule of possibility, a tiny universe of reactions that might, against all odds, survive long enough to divide, and then to divide again. When you breathe, when you move, when your own cells repair and replicate, you're repeating the same story that began here. The walls that protect your cells are echoes of those first fragile boundaries. The chains of DNA that carry your memory are the descendants of those first spirals. The metabolism that fuels your heartbeat began as those early loops of chemistry, quietly circling within droplets adrift in the sea. There is something deeply humbling in knowing that life's foundation was laid in silence, in places unseen. That all the vast beauty of forests and oceans, of creatures and consciousness, began in droplets so small that they could fit invisibly on a grain of sand. And yet, this is the nature of beginnings. They're often quiet, often hidden, often fragile. But within them lies a strength that outlasts storms, a persistence that endures for billions of years. The rise of these early cells was not smooth, not certain. Each step forward was followed by countless failures. For every droplet that survived, thousands were lost. For every strand of molecules that copied itself, countless others broke apart. The ocean was not kind, nor cruel. It was simply vast and unending, a place where chance reigned supreme. Yet within that chaos, order found a foothold. And once found, it could not be lost. These early cells did not yet resemble the elegant forms of life we know. They were not plants, nor animals, nor even bacteria in their full form. They were experiments, each one a trial in survival. Some may have used heat to drive their reactions. Some may have fed on minerals from vents in the seafloor. Others may have drifted in shallow pools, powered by light or evaporation. Each one was a different attempt at the same goal: to endure, to persist, to continue. Imagine billions of these tiny worlds scattered across the oceans, drifting endlessly. Each one holds the same fragile hope, that it might last long enough to divide, to carry its pattern forward. From the outside, nothing seems to change. The ocean looks the same, the sky looks the same, the land is still barren. Yet beneath the surface, the greatest transformation in Earth's history is underway. From these droplets, the architecture of life emerges. The cell becomes the unit of persistence, the vessel that carries memory and possibility. Without it, no creature, no tree, no human could exist. The walls of the cell are more than a boundary. They are the line that separates the living from the non-living, the ordered from the chaotic, the enduring from the fleeting. And even now, as you listen, you carry within you the legacy of those first droplets. Every cell of your body is a continuation of that ancient lineage. The walls that protect your cells, the networks that sustain them, the codes they carry, all of it was born in the silence of that primordial sea. You are, in a very real sense, a walking ocean, carrying with you the memory of those first worlds within droplets. So when you close your eyes and imagine that distant time, picture not grand landscapes or mighty creatures, but tiny, fragile droplets adrift in endless seas. Picture worlds so small that they seem invisible, yet within them lies the story of everything. Picture the first true cells, silent and unknowing, yet carrying the promise of forests, rivers, birds and stars reflected in water. The Earth has changed beyond recognition since those days. Continents have risen and fallen, climates have shifted, creatures have come and gone. But the cell remains. It is the one thread unbroken across billions of years, the one vessel that has carried life from its first spark to this very moment. And it all began in droplets, in silence, in the unseen worlds of the ancient sea. In those hidden chambers, life first learned to endure, and from that endurance, all of existence was born. The Earth 4 billion years ago was still young, restless and raw, yet something profound was quietly taking shape in the oceans. The earliest droplets and primitive cells, fragile though they were, had begun to stabilize. What was once rare and fleeting became persistent. What was once only chemistry now carried the first pulse of continuity. And with this persistence, the stage was set for the rise of ancient micro-worlds, domains invisible to the naked eye, yet vast in their influence. Imagine the ocean surface at that time. From far above, nothing has changed. The skies are still turbulent, painted in strange hues by volcanic gases and a dim, newborn sun. The continents are barren rock, battered by storms, with no trace of green or sound of life. The seas roll dark and restless, endless grey-blue plains beneath a heavy sky. To human eyes, it would look desolate, silent, lifeless. But the truth lies hidden in the smallest scales, beyond sight, in places where droplets gather and cling, where currents mix minerals, where sunlight filters in shallow pools. It is here, in these invisible worlds, that life begins to unfold in earnest. Within the waters, the first cells multiply. Each division is an act of survival, a choice made not consciously, but through the language of molecules. The fragile strands that carry memory copy themselves, though often imperfectly. Errors creep in, variations appear, and from those variations new forms emerge. Most fail, collapsing back into the chaos of the sea, but some endure, and those that endure set in motion the great experiment of evolution. Picture the ocean as a canvas, painted not with colours but with possibilities. In some corners near deep-sea vents, heat and minerals fuel communities of cells that feed on the strange chemistry of the Earth's interior. Around volcanic shores, boiling pools teem with droplets that gather, break and reform, giving rise to other ways of survival. In shallower waters, where sunlight touches the waves, cells begin to explore the potential of capturing that light, turning its energy into sustenance. Each environment is a world unto itself, each droplet of water a stage for survival, each cell an actor in a silent play. Though these micro-worlds are invisible, they are vast in number. Trillions upon trillions of cells drift in the oceans, each one a fragment of possibility. Together, they shape the chemistry of the seas, altering the balance of gases, influencing the cycles of minerals. They are so small that no single one can change the Earth. Yet together, across unimaginable numbers and unbroken spans of time, they begin to transform the planet. If you could drift among them, shrinking down into their scale, you would see a world of endless motion. Tiny bubbles encased in delicate walls, each one bustling with internal currents. Molecules move, fold, and react within them, patterns repeating endlessly. Some cells are simple spheres, nothing more than containers of fragile memory. Others stretch into rods, filaments, or clusters, experimenting with new shapes that allow them to divide more easily or cling together. Some gather in colonies, groups of cells linked loosely, gaining strength in numbers. These are the first whispers of cooperation, the first steps toward the complex societies of life that will one day dominate the planet. What makes these ancient micro-worlds so extraordinary is not their size, but their resilience. Storms rage above them, continents shift, seas boil and cool, yet the cells continue. They divide, they adapt, they persist. In their persistence, they are already beginning to write the story of Earth as a living world. And though no creature could yet look upon them, their influence is everywhere. The chemistry of the oceans is changing, slowly but surely, guided by the hidden hand of countless invisible lives. There is beauty in the smallness of it. The vast history of life does not begin with grandeur, but with endurance. It begins with tiny forms that no eye could see, carrying within them the instructions for everything that will follow. It begins with micro-worlds that turn chaos into order, that make the improbable real. From them will come every leaf, every fin, every wing. From them will come the pulse of animals, the roots of forests, the rise of consciousness. Yet in these early ages they are only droplets, only cells, only fragile structures adrift in a hostile sea. Imagine standing on the shore of that world, hearing the roar of volcanic waves, smelling the acrid air heavy with sulphur and smoke. To you, the earth is still barren, still lifeless. Yet beneath your feet, in the pools that gather between the rocks, in the spray that clings to stones, in the waves that crash endlessly against the shore, entire universes are unfolding. They are too small to see, but they are everywhere, filling the oceans with a silent work of survival. You are surrounded by life, though you would not know it. And it is in this invisibility that life's genius lies. By remaining hidden, by thriving in scales so small that storms and fire cannot touch them, the first cells ensure their survival. No volcano can burn the ocean dry. No storm can wash away every droplet. No impact from the heavens can silence the trillions of lives scattered through the seas. The earth may be violent, but these tiny worlds are resilient beyond imagination. Over time, new strategies appear. Some cells learn to harness chemical gradients, pulling energy from the difference between one side of their wall and the other. Others find ways to use light, capturing photons and turning them into food. These are the first inventors of photosynthesis, humble pioneers that will, in time, fill the skies with oxygen and change the world forever. But in these early ages, it is simply another way to endure. Each new trick, each new adaptation, becomes a foothold in the great climb of life. You might picture these microworlds as cities, each cell a bustling chamber of reactions. Within, strands of memory coil and copy themselves. Proteins fold into tools that perform endless tasks. The cell wall, thin as it seems, is a fortress, keeping order within against the chaos without. And though each cell is simple, together they form a civilization as vast as the oceans themselves. This civilization is not built of stone or fire. It has no monuments, no speech, no design. It is built of molecules and membranes, of patterns and cycles. Yet it is no less real. In fact, it is the foundation of everything that will follow. Without these invisible cities of cells, there could be no forests, no creatures, no human hands to carve stories into stone. The rise of ancient microworlds is the quiet beginning of every world you know. Time passes, though time itself means little to the cells. Generations rise and fall in moments. A single second in your scale of being might hold hundreds of cycles of growth and division for them. And so, in spans too vast for human minds to measure, their influence spreads. The oceans, once only chaotic mixtures of chemicals, become alive with hidden order. The surface of the earth, once barren and silent, becomes home to the first true ecosystems, even if they remain invisible to the eye. It is tempting to imagine that these early worlds were fragile, forever at risk of vanishing. Yet in truth, they were remarkably strong. Fragility in one sense was countered by resilience in another. The secret of life lay not in avoiding destruction, but in enduring it. Cells could divide and multiply so quickly that even if most perished, enough would survive. Variation ensured that some would adapt, and in this way, life became not a fleeting spark, but an unbroken flame. Even now, in the world you know, the majority of life remains invisible. For every tree, every bird, every human, there are countless trillions of microbes, still shaping the chemistry of the seas, still forming the hidden foundation of existence. The story of the ancient microworlds is not just a chapter in the past. It is a story that continues in every breath you take, in every drop of water, in every handful of soil. The invisible world is not gone. It is all around you, all the time. So as you imagine the rise of those first microworlds, let yourself picture a hidden planet, a secret earth beneath the earth you see. Picture the seas alive with tiny lives, each one carrying the memory of survival, each one part of an ocean-wide civilization. Picture the first steps of evolution, taken not by creatures walking on land, but by cells dividing in silence, by droplets enduring in shadows. These were the true pioneers, the builders of the unseen. And know that you are their descendant. Every cell in your body is a direct continuation of that ancient lineage. Every thought you have, every dream you follow, every heartbeat you feel is powered by the same hidden chemistry that began in these microworlds. You are not separate from them. You are them, made larger, made complex, made conscious. The rise of ancient microworlds is the rise of everything. It is the beginning of endurance, of transformation, of possibility. It is the first time the earth was truly alive. And though the planet looked barren, though no creature walked the land, the oceans already held the promise of forests, rivers, animals, and human voices. All of it lay hidden in the invisible worlds of the sea. The earth was no longer silent. It was whispering, quietly, invisibly, in the language of cells. And from those whispers would come the great symphony of life. The earth, 4 billion years ago, was no paradise. It was a world of extremes, a planet still shaking off the violence of its own birth. The surface was scarred by constant bombardment from space. The seas churned with heat and chemicals, and the skies were heavy with gases poisonous to anything you would recognize as life today. Yet in the midst of this chaos, life did not just emerge, it endured. It found ways to survive in a hostile alien Earth. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of those primeval oceans. The waves crash endlessly against a barren shore of dark volcanic rock. Above you, the sky glows with a strange copper light, filtered through thick clouds of methane, carbon dioxide and sulfur. Lightning flickers across the horizon, igniting storms that sweep across the seas. To breathe here would be impossible, for there is no oxygen to fill your lungs, no air as you know it to sustain life. The earth is alive with fire, but hostile to anything familiar, yet hidden beneath those waves, in tiny droplets and fragile cells, something extraordinary is persisting. Life in these times was not protected by forests or shielded by atmospheres. There were no ecosystems as we understand them, no safe havens. Instead, cells faced an unrelenting world of danger. Radiation from the young sun bombarded the surface. Asteroids still rained down with terrible force, each one capable of boiling seas and shaking continents. Volcanic eruptions split the crust, pouring rivers of molten rock across the land and releasing choking fumes into the air. Even the oceans themselves were harsh, saturated with metals and chemicals, constantly shifting between heat and cold. Yet somehow these ancient cells adapted. Survival meant more than simply existing. It meant becoming resilient in the face of constant catastrophe. Imagine being one of these cells carried by the currents of the sea. You have no eyes, no awareness, only the delicate machinery within your membrane. Yet you respond to the world around you. When the water grows too hot, your proteins begin to falter, and you must change or perish. When chemicals shift, you must find new ways to use them, or drift into silence. Every moment is a test, and every test shapes the course of life's future. Some cells find refuge in the shadows of the deep. Near hydrothermal vents where boiling water bursts into the ocean from beneath the crust, life makes its home. To us, it would seem impossible. The temperatures soar, the waters are thick with sulfur and metals, the pressure is immense. But for these ancient beings, it is a sanctuary. Here, in the heat and minerals, they find a steady source of energy. They learn to feed not on light, but on the chemistry of the earth itself. These vent dwellers will have descendants that still survive today in the darkest oceans, unchanged for billions of years. Others cling to the edges of volcanic pools, where water rises and falls with the tides, where droplets form, dry and reform again. These cycles are brutal, yet they give opportunities for survival. Molecules that drift freely in the water become concentrated as droplets evaporate, encouraging reactions that would not happen otherwise. Cells that can endure the drying and swelling of these pools gain strength, and with that strength, they secure their place in the lineage of life. Still others push into the shallows, where sunlight filters down through the water. The light is harsh, filled with ultraviolet radiation, yet it carries energy waiting to be harnessed. Some of the earlier cells discover ways to capture this energy, crude beginnings of photosynthesis. They do not yet transform the planet, but the first hints of light-powered survival are born. Those that succeed in this experiment pave the way for the greatest revolution Earth will ever know. Everywhere, survival comes with risk. A single shift in temperature can destroy fragile structures. A wave of radiation can tear apart the delicate strands of memory inside a cell. But the secret of life lies not in avoiding destruction, but in enduring it. Cells divide so quickly, reproduce so abundantly, that even if countless numbers are lost, some always survive. Each survivor carries a slightly altered pattern, a variation born of imperfection, and in those variations lies the power of adaptation. The hostile Earth does not defeat life. It shapes it. Picture the Earth as a vast training ground, harsh and unforgiving, yet filled with hidden potential. Every volcanic eruption, every storm, every bombardment forces life to become tougher, more flexible, more inventive. Without this crucible of extremes, life might have remained fragile, fleeting. But because of it, life becomes resilient, unyielding. The very hostility of the early Earth is what ensures that life, once begun, will never truly vanish. To watch this unfold is to see a paradox. The planet itself seems determined to resist life, yet it also provides the very forces that make life possible. The storms mix chemicals across the oceans, creating new possibilities. The vents and pools offer energy where none would exist otherwise. The bombardments from space, though destructive, also deliver new elements, perhaps even complex molecules that feed the chemistry of survival. The Earth is both enemy and ally, destroyer and creator, and life in its silence learns to navigate this balance. In time, survival becomes more than endurance, it becomes transformation. Some cells begin to build stronger walls around themselves, fortresses of molecules that shield them from toxins. Others invent repair systems, ways to fix the damage caused by radiation or chemical stress. Some even learn to share fragments of memory with one another, exchanging patterns in a primitive form of communication. In these small, invisible acts, life is becoming more sophisticated. The hostile Earth is not only being endured, it is being mastered. Consider how alien this world would feel to you. There is no green, no bird song, no forest to soften the land. There is only stone, fire, and sea. Yet if you could shrink yourself to the scale of these cells, you would find a world every bit as complex as a rainforest or coral reef. You would see endless interactions, constant struggles, tiny victories that ensure survival. It is a wilderness of the microscopic, a frontier of persistence. And though you could not see it, the future is being written in every droplet, in every silent struggle. The Earth's hostility is unrelenting. Great impacts still scar the surface, boiling oceans and darkening skies. Yet life always finds a way back. After each catastrophe, cells that linger in the depths or hide in the shadows of rocks rise again. There is no final destruction, no complete erasure. Life bends but does not break. The unbroken thread of survival stretches on, through billions of years, through fire and ice, through chaos and calm. This is the great miracle of the microworlds, that survival does not require peace or stability. It requires only persistence, only the ability to adapt, to shift, to endure. From this lesson, all of life is born. Even the most complex beings, even the greatest civilizations carry within them the memory of this first endurance. Every breath you take, every thought you hold, is powered by cells that are direct descendants of those that once faced the hostile Earth and survived. And so, as you imagine this alien world, remember that it is not truly gone. The Earth you live on still carries its echoes. In the boiling vents of the ocean floor, in the acidic pools of volcanic springs, in the ice of polar seas, life still survives in ways that mirror those first experiments. The resilience of those early cells is not a story of the past, it is the foundation of the present. The Earth was hostile, the Earth was alien, yet in its fire and storm it became the cradle of life, and the fragile cells that endured became the ancestors of everything that would follow. Their survival was not inevitable. It was earned, moment by moment, in a world determined to test them. And because they survived, the story of life continues, stretching from those first droplets to the vast tapestry of being that fills the world today. The hostile Earth did not silence life. It made life unbreakable. If you could stand at the threshold of time and witness the first breath of life, what would you feel? Not the breath of lungs, not the cry of an animal, or the whisper of a forest, but the faintest pulse of existence itself. A flicker in the waters, invisible to the naked eye, and yet monumental in its meaning. To imagine it is to journey back to a world without song or shadow, where the silence of the earth was broken not by thunder or flame, but by the quiet persistence of something new, something alive. For billions of years before this moment, the earth was only a stage of rock and fire, a restless body turning beneath alien skies. Volcanoes roared, oceans boiled, asteroids scarred the land, and yet nothing had taken root in that chaos. But in time, the chemistry of creation found its rhythm. Droplets carried patterns, molecules folded into shapes that whispered to one another, and a new kind of order began to rise from disorder. It was fragile, so fragile and yet strong enough to endure. That was the first breath of life, not a sound, but a spark that carried forward into everything that would ever be. When you reflect on that moment, you're reflecting on yourself. Every cell in your body is part of an unbroken chain, stretching back to those earliest forms that stirred in the seas 4 billion years ago. You're not separate from that beginning. You are its continuation. The proteins and enzymes that guide your life today are built upon the same patterns that sustain those first cells. The oxygen in your blood, the energy that fuels your thoughts, all of it is a gift from life's first experiments, carried forward through an endless procession of generations. Imagine holding a single droplet of that primordial ocean in the palm of your hand. Within it, invisible and countless, are tiny worlds of possibility. Some will vanish, broken by the forces around them, lost in the turbulence of the sea, but others will linger. They will adapt, divide, and endure. From their persistence, the story of life begins. That droplet contains not just cells, but futures, forests and rivers, animals and people, dreams and memories. All of it lies hidden in the patience of survival. The earth itself remembers, in its rocks, in the deep layers of its crust, in the traces left behind by ancient microbes. The memory of that first breath is preserved. Scientists find it in the patterns of carbon, in the shapes etched into stone, in the subtle chemical signatures that tell us life once passed here. The record is faint, almost erased by the passage of time, yet still it speaks. And when you listen, you hear not just the history of the planet, but the story of your own origin. Reflecting on that world, it feels both alien and familiar. Alien because the skies were toxic, the seas were turbulent, and the very air was unfit to breathe. Familiar because within those seas swam the ancestors of all life, shaping the path that would lead eventually to you. The hostile earth did not extinguish them. It forged them, tempered them like fire shapes metal. And in their survival lies a message that life does not require comfort, only persistence. It does not wait for peace, only opportunity. Think for a moment about the improbability of it all. Out of countless chemical reactions, countless collisions and dissolutions, somehow one pathway succeeded. One fragile pattern crossed the threshold into self-sustaining life. If it had not, if chance had tilted just slightly another way, perhaps this planet would have remained silent forever, a barren world of storms and seas without voices. Yet here you are, breathing, thinking, reflecting on that beginning. To witness the first breath of life is to witness the birth of possibility itself. There is wonder in realizing that the earth did not simply host life, it became alive through it. The planet and its inhabitants are not separate stories, but one. The mountains, the oceans, the atmosphere, and the cells within them all evolved together, shaping and reshaping each other over eons. The rise of oxygen transformed the skies, and in turn, new kinds of life emerged to fill that space. The earth is not just a backdrop, it is a participant, a partner in the unfolding of existence. Now, imagine standing quietly at the edge of that ancient shore As the sun rises through a haze of strange gases, the air shimmers with heat, and the sea glows faintly with minerals. Somewhere within the waves, unseen, a small cell divides for the first time. It is nothing you can hear, nothing you can see, and yet it is more profound than any sunrise or storm. That moment is not just history, it is the beginning of everything. In reflecting on this, you may feel small, like a fleeting thought in the expanse of time, but there is comfort in that smallness. For just as those first cells were fragile and fleeting, and yet carried the weight of all that would follow, so too do you carry the continuation of their journey. The vastness of time does not erase your place within it. It gives it depth, connects you to a lineage as old as the earth itself. As the story of life stretches forward, it becomes more intricate, more beautiful, more diverse. Yet its foundation remains the same. The ability to endure, to adapt, to persist. Every leaf, every creature, every heartbeat is built upon that same principle. The first breath has never ended. It flows through you now, as much as it flowed through those ancient seas. To live is to carry it forward, to keep breathing the breath that began 4 billion years ago. And so, in this reflection, you're not simply looking back, you're looking inward. The story of Earth's first life is not a distant tale of a forgotten time. It is your story, the opening chapter of your existence. To witness it, even in imagination, is to understand that you are deeply connected to the cosmos, to the planet, to the fragile and enduring spark that first dared to exist. As the thought settles, allow it to become gentle, like the soft fading of light at dusk. The oceans are calm now in your mind, the skies less turbulent. You hear only the slow rhythm of the waves, carrying the memory of the first breath across 4 billion years. It is a rhythm that continues within you, quiet and steady. And with that rhythm, let the reflection rest. The first breath has been witnessed, its meaning carried into your heart. The journey has been long, through fire and silence, through oceans and storms, through survival and growth. But now it rests, as you should too. The earth has spoken, the story has been told, and the breath of life continues softly in the present. Good night.